What is going on, you beautiful humans? Welcome back to the channel. And hey, today we are going to be discussing the endless debate of whether you should rent or if you should buy that home. And if you've been watching home prices and interest rates skyrocket as of late, it is easy to think that maybe kind of renting is just the smarter move right now. But hey, if you are raising a family, if you're thinking about school districts and friends, about long-term stability, that decision does get a lot more personal and a lot more nuanced. So today, I want to walk you through the pros and cons of renting and buying. And if you're struggling to afford a home, I will share a few strategies with you that you can use right now. So let's get into it. Now, I do want to follow up with an example with numbers for both, but let's at least set these points up and then we can build on them in a few. Now, the case for renting. Now, let's give renting its fair credit because renting is often like more affordable month to month. And of course, it is more flexible, so you can move without the hassle of selling a house. And then of course, there is the lower responsibility aspect. So when something significant breaks, that is the landlord's problem. Because here's the thing, we had just sold a home. And then when we moved back to Colorado, we were renting at that time because this was actually during the Great Recession. And let's just say that we got out of our other home just in time. But the thing is that the instability wasn't just the stock market. But we actually had a dryer go out in this rental, and then the cabinet installed microwave, and then a gas fireplace that needed some repairs. And these all ended up being replaced by the owner. So let's just say that that was awesome for us. However, when the real estate market is volatile, which that is actually what we're in at this time, renting can mean avoiding buying into a bubble. But renting has its risks, especially when you're trying to build a life for your family. And then, of course, there are the hidden risks of renting and what doesn't really get talked about enough, and renting isn't really as safe as it feels. So we know that rent prices can and often do go up year after year. And a landlord can decide to sell the property and not renew your lease. And this can often happen if the owner passes and then that property is inherited. And then the family that receives this may not want to be a landlord, or they just want to liquidate or just get out from under that responsibility. But moving frequently can disrupt your children's education, their friendships, and pretty much your own commute to work. And I don't think we talk about that enough. So for families, this uncertainty can take a real emotional and financial toll. Now, of course, moving into a natural segue of the power of home ownership for families is that when you own a home, even with all of the responsibilities, you are building some stability. So first off, you have your fixed mortgage payments, and especially like with a 30-year fix, we'll use that as an example. This is predictable. And then of course, you can have access to better schools because a lot of school zoning often favors homeowners. And in many districts, you need to prove that you reside within that zoned area. Although I do know that there are some districts out there that you can open enroll in some schools where you may not really need to fall within that particular area. But then there is the long-term wealth building. So even if home prices fluctuate historically, real estate has helped families grow some generational wealth. But I do want to expand on that for like a second here. So stay with me because it is nice to get equity in a home. But I have also adopted a mindset that sees the wealth tied to home ownership as a way to control the access to certain jobs that you may get based on that particular location, or maybe even allowing you that time back that you may spend commuting to work because you're able to live closer to work. And I know that when I started my consulting business years ago, that I initially built out services that I was able to deliver within the area of my home, which then allowed me to easily be available for my kids at the end of a school day or even for their sports. So it's not necessarily about the equity in the home, but the equity that I could build outside of the home just because of where I lived. And that includes the time that I was able to be with my boys, because that to me was a mark of true wealth. So it's great for the home to appreciate, but I've never really looked at a home as an ATM necessarily. That value to me and that stability was worth way more, but although it is nice for the home to appreciate. But you get what I'm saying here. Now, as far as your home becoming your foundation, this is where memories are made. This is where your kids grow up. This is where life happens. So I hope that that's kind of like landing as I'm kind of throwing it out there. Now, of course, what about the cost of home ownership? So let's be real here, because owning a home isn't just a mortgage payment, because you will have property taxes, and our taxes continue to go up every time we're assessed. Then of course, you've got the maintenance and the repairs, and then there are those insurance costs. And then of course, that potential homeowners association, the HOA. I mean, those things are here to stay. I don't necessarily like them, but hey, if you like an HOA, by all means. But why it's so important not to just afford the mortgage, it is something that you need to budget for when you look at those hidden costs. Now, let's actually take a look at that example that I was talking about, keeping in mind that I know that home prices in your area may be significantly higher, which the rents will be as well, but let's just use these numbers for this one. So taking into account a 3-bedroom home, let's say that the rent is about $2,700 a month. However, buying that similar 3-bedroom home, that purchase price could be $430,000 with a 5% down payment of $21,500. However, again, 5% down payment, there are first-time homebuyer programs. And then of course, there are some new home builds where the builder will incentivize and help you with those down payments so that you actually don't have to put that much down and maybe even kind of tweak your interest rate. But hey, have someone look at the fine print for you, because honestly, in those situations, you might get stuck where you're not going to be able to refinance for years. So just be careful. Now, considering the 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.5%, and that's just kind of what I pulled out as of today, that's around $2,580 a month, and that is principal and interest. Then you go ahead and throw in the property taxes and the insurance, and that's about another $550 a month, with a total monthly home ownership cost around $3,130. Now, on paper, renting still saves you about $430 a month. That's right now. And of course, you don't need to come up with that big down payment, just a security deposit and then, your first month's rent. But in this next example, when we look at the longer term view, that is the stability and the equity. Now let's actually fast forward 5 years from now. So rent has increased about 4% year over year, which is a pretty typical national average. Now that $2,700 rent that you had 5 years ago, it's likely now closer to $3,270 a month. Now your mortgage payment still around $2,580 plus that $550, give or take like a little bit of insurance and adjustments. And I will have to say that our property taxes have gone up year over year. But during those 5 years, you've likely paid down about $27,000, maybe $30,000 on that loan principal, because understand that those mortgages are front loaded in interest. But if your home is appreciating at just about 3% annually, and that is so conservative, on that estimate, that $430,000 home, it's now worth roughly $498,000. So almost a $500,000 home. So what you've done is you've built some equity and you've shielded yourself from rising housing costs. And so that's the thing. You really have to ask yourself, if you're early in your career, or you think that you might move within 2 to 3 years, renting often makes more sense. Why is that? Well, because selling a home comes with real costs like agent fees, closing costs, potential repairs that you have to make on that home. And really what that says is that short ownership periods often does not give enough time for appreciation to outweigh those costs. So if you're not planning to stay put for at least 5 to 7 years, depending on where you are, renting could keep you more flexible and financially nimble. It all comes down to your personal goals. So if you're prioritizing flexibility, then those lower upfront costs, renting, hey, that is the way to go. But if you're craving stability, predictable costs, and really long-term growth, owning a home becomes an investment in your future. Okay, so you're sold on buying a home. So here are a couple solutions if you're struggling to buy. So starting smaller. So if you could look outside the hottest neighborhoods, like I know that the optics and like that neighborhood might be pulling you in. However, there are some unrealized gains there that you might benefit from, because if you really, really are in love with that neighborhood, there are certain situations that you can, build like happiness and just joy, and it's totally worth it. So if that's the case, could you consider a condo or a townhome as a starter home? My wife and I had a condo. Like we started out like with a condo, and there is nothing wrong with that. And then of course you can get creative with that down payment. So look into first-time buyer programs, and some offer down payment assistance or require like only 3 to 5% down. And here's the thing, like I was mentioning before, home builders do have incentives. And so oftentimes you don't need a ton to put down on those homes, and maybe even they might buy down some of that interest rate for you. But again, have a professional, somebody who knows what they're doing and look at the contract. And then of course, here's the thing. Ask family for a gifted down payment if you can. I'm not saying like you need to be indebted to family. That could be like a path that you don't even want to consider, but many lenders will allow that. if you just don't have like a ton of savings built up and they're kind of like looking at your history and saying like, well, you don't really have a lot here to put down, have a family member maybe gift that to you if possible. Now, I have mentioned house hacking before. Buy up a duplex if you can, live in one side of the unit, and then rent the other to offset your mortgage, if at all possible. Now, of course, saving strategically, here I go again, open up that high yield savings account, because here's the thing, when you're trying to put money away, you're setting up those automatic transfers, even the small ones, but every paycheck, consistency beats intensity. And so here's the thing, put that in that high yield savings account. You got to get a little something for your money. Now, bear with me here. Don't like completely just don't dismiss me here. Can you live with your parents? I don't know your situation. I don't know what it was like growing up with them. Is it like a welcoming environment for you? Is it something that you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm a grown person here. I can't do it. Even if you're like a married couple, maybe if you have like young kids, is it possible? I'm not telling you to like get in a situation where you feel like, oh my gosh, this is miserable. This is not even worth it, but could you? And then of course, there's this whole like timing the market wisely, but don't wait forever. You don't have to buy at the perfect time. And if you're waiting for the market to crash, it's adjusting throughout like the country. I don't think we're gonna see a crash here. Just focus on buying when it is the right time for you financially and emotionally, not based on the headlines. And hey, here's the thing, if you are handy, think about a fixer-upper. That might not be a bad deal. If you're willing to put in a lot of the work, here's the thing. My wife and I did this with one young kiddo. Like we had like a 4-month-old at the time, and we were ripping up flooring, carpets, walls, gutting kitchens, and doing all that stuff. And then eventually we did have another one on the way, not far after he arrived. And so communication though, oh my gosh, communication, because if you have jobs and you're juggling the small kids, like just make sure that you're taking care of yourselves, because that can get a little gnarly. But hey, if you're handy, that could be a potential win for you. But here's the thing, renting isn't wrong and buying isn't right for everyone all the time. But if you're building a family and you're dreaming about giving them that stable, secure foundation, it is absolutely a dream that is worth working toward. And you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps, smart strategies, and a little, maybe like a lot of patience, it'll get you there. But hey, if you have found this helpful, as always, I do appreciate your time here, and I would love to see you in the comment section below. I am genuinely rooting for you here on this one. So you go out there and you stay informed, you stay empowered on your next level up, and I will catch you right back here on the next one.